It was a freezing midnight, and I was hit with this overwhelming urge to go see my girlfriend, Lily. My parents were all about curfew, but they were knockout sleepers, and I was basically a pro at sneaking out. I've done it a gazillion times already, and each time it's like a wild, rebellious escape. Man, I had no clue that tonight was going to turn into an actual living nightmare. I slyly cracked open my bedroom window, making sure the moon was the only one peeking in. I thought this would be a piece of cake, just your run-of-the-mill sneaking out situation. But just as I was about to jump down, I noticed something weird, a shady character lurking under the streetlight, looking up at my window all creepy-like. I was totally frozen, with sweat starting to bead on my forehead. My heart was going crazy. I didn't know who that person was, and this definitely wasn't part of the plan. I thought about turning back, but it was already too late. That random person caught a glimpse of me. Feeling all pumped up, I mustered the courage to jump, fingers crossed that he wouldn't come after me. The landing was a bit rough, but I managed to touch down. My feet were sopping wet from the grass covered in morning dew, and my heart was pounding in my ears. All I wanted now was to reach Lily's place, which was just a couple blocks away. I bolted through the dimly lit streets, unable to shake the stranger from my mind. Once I got to Lily's street, I could finally catch my breath and breathe easy, thinking I had managed to shake off that creepy person. I started feeling more confident, so I decided to take it easy. I was practically right outside Lily's house. I could practically smell the jasmine blooming in her mom's garden. Boy, I had no clue that things were about to get a whole lot worse. I walked up to Lily's place, and the chilly night air gave me goosebumps. I was just about to chuck a little rock at her window when suddenly I heard rustling leaves behind me. I spun around, and there he was, that random dude who had been checking me out as I left my house. He was this really tall guy, wearing a beat-up black hoodie that covered his whole face. All I could make out was his wicked, gleaming eyes. My heart was pounding like crazy, and I felt completely overwhelmed with fear.
Who are you?
I stuttered, kind of stepping away. No reply, just some creepy laughter. He had a real mean streak, and you could tell. I quickly checked out Lily's place, hoping she'd catch my attention, pop up by the window, and yell for assistance. That's when it went down. Someone grabbed me from behind, holding me tight. Out of nowhere, this random dude comes at me, grabs my phone and wallet before I even had a chance to do anything. I was totally stuck. I couldn't even speak. I was so pumped up that I couldn't utter a word. Suddenly, I heard a gentle voice from behind me saying,
"Yo, who's that?"
Turns out it was Lily. She heard all the noise and, feeling bold, stepped outside. The random dude looked back at me with this creepy smile on his face, sending shivers down my spine.
"You need some help?"
He smirked, showing off his nasty-looking teeth. Lily was scared. She finally realized how screwed we were. She quickly dashed back indoors, forcefully slamming the door and making sure it was securely locked. I was banging on the door like crazy, screaming at her to call the cops, my hands hurting like hell from how desperate I was. The random person, not giving a care, began sauntering around in a creepy way, teasing me.
"The cops won't lift a finger for you,"
he said in a chillingly calm manner. I kept banging on the door like crazy, screaming for someone to save me, and the random guy just stood there, staring at me with those intense eyes, never once looking away from my scared-to-death face. Man, it felt like freaking forever, but then bam, the police lights lit up the whole darkness. Relief surged through me. The random guy bolted, disappearing before the cops could nab him. They showed up right on time and caught me freaking out outside Lily's door, shaking like a leaf. I kind of told them what went down, but it was obvious the intruder covered his tracks completely. The cops said they'd look around and dig deeper. Lily's folks quickly came to the spot, and her mom offered me some solace while the cops filled out their report. Lily's dad showed his gratitude for me looking out for her and promised to beef up their security. But dude, there was still this heavy sense of doom hanging around. The dude was out there, in God knows where, and I couldn't help but freak out at the thought of him coming back. In the next few days, the cops looked high and low for the intruder, but couldn't find any clues. The whole thing messed me up, and I just couldn't shake off this creepy sense that someone was watching me, even when I was just at home. After my parents realized how risky it was out there, they slapped me with a strict curfew, so hanging out with Lily past midnight became off limits. That night was such a terrifying experience, and it kept me up at night thinking about what could have happened if Lily didn't hear me calling for help. That random dude not only swiped all my stuff, but he also snatched away something way bigger, my feeling of safety and naivety. Even now, I can't help but feel a constant unease about the creep lurking around somewhere. Like a permanent resident in the depths of my thoughts, I found out the tough way that not every late-night adventure turns into an exciting thrill ride. Some just end up giving you nightmares for life. A night so cold you wonder if you're in your right mind. I was sitting on the couch with my family, watching a movie marathon, when I suddenly realized that my cell phone, my lifeline, was still at school. The clock above the TV read 9 p.m., and my heart was pounding. School may be closed, but under no circumstances will you leave your smartphone behind. As I grabbed my coat and ran out of the house, ignoring the protests of my family, all I could hear was the sound of my heart pounding. When I got to school, I was very nervous. The building is empty and the doors are tightly closed. Panic rose in my throat, but I held it back. I had to go in. While looking around for a solution, I saw a rusty water pipe. A twisted plant climbed up near the second-story window. I started climbing without hesitation. Every time I touched a frozen metal pipe, my gloves would prick. The night was dark, and the only sounds I could hear were the sounds of cars in the distance and my excited breathing. The slightly open window on the second floor was a relief when I arrived. I opened it, went inside, and was left in the dark. I fumbled for my cell phone in the dark and found the classroom. The school was very quiet, and I cautiously made my way to my desk, the only familiar object in the evil darkness. My heart was pounding and echoing in the quiet room. My precious cell phone, with notifications on, was lying on the desk. I wanted to quickly put it in my pocket and get out of that uneasy place. I left as quietly as I had entered through the window. After passing through the dark interior, the cold night air outside was refreshing. I almost missed that person hiding in the shadows and thought about running away from that school. At first, I thought it was a night vision, a product of anxious thoughts. As I hurried forward, I felt like a companion. The man hid in a corner of the schoolyard and was almost unnoticed. My whole being trembled with fear. I quickened my pace, the sound of my shoes on the pavement matching the sound of footsteps behind me in the quiet night. Fear took hold of me as I caught the man following me unconscious. I bravely looked back, and sure enough, I saw him at first sight. He was tall and wore a long, worn coat that floated in the water as he walked. He wore a hat that covered his face. As his footsteps approached me, my heart raced. I turned suddenly and tried to throw him down the winding path, but the sound of footsteps filled me with fear. Out of fear, I returned home and ran to a more populated and safer place. The empty streets satisfied his hunger for my desperation. I couldn't go home and came back panting. I felt that the whole world was conspiring against me, that an inexplicable fear lurked in every shadow and corner. As I entered the dark road, I realized I had to hide. I hid behind an old trash can at the end of the road. I held my breath and waited for him to come closer. I was in danger of exposure. The man stopped at the beginning of the road. I saw him. He moved his eyes and looked around as if he saw me. I was so scared. How did he find me? What did he want? Was I ready to call for help if I needed it? Before I could do anything, he was gone. He disappeared into the street. I felt relieved. I hid for a moment and looked carefully behind the trash can. The coast seemed clear, but the uncertainty remained. I realized I needed to alert the authorities that I was being followed by an unknown person. I came out of hiding and walked silently through the empty streets. I jumped at every shadow, at every rustle of wind. I got home and quickly locked the door. My fingers were shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I quickly looked out the window but saw nothing. Shaking, I told the 911 operator the horrors of that night. The police arrived quickly, and I gave them a detailed description of the man who was following me. He promised to do a thorough investigation. I felt uncomfortable watching them leave. Who was he and what were his intentions? The next few days passed in a haze of anxiety and sleeplessness. Closing the doors and windows did not eliminate the tracking. The police had no idea about this mysterious man, and I was still afraid. I still don't know who was following me or what his purpose was. When I left my phone at school that night, it was a nightmare I will never forget. We snuck out, Rick, Sarah, Chris, and me. We loved horror games and couldn't resist the adrenaline rush of sneaking out at night. We could not get rid of this habit, and our passion for horror grew stronger and stronger. On a cold Friday night, we decided to give it a try. Rick stumbled upon this haunted house hidden deep in the scary forest. Wouldn't it be nice to just show our love for all things spooky by fooling around with an Ouija board in a spooky wasteland? The plan was simple. Wait until your parents are asleep, then sneak out your bedroom window and meet each other in the nearby park. It was pretty amazing, but we had fun and totally dug it. We both had backpacks that we made ourselves. Candles, lanterns, and even an Ouija board that Chris had stolen from his sister's room. As we got closer to that big scary house, our hearts started pounding. The moonlight barely filtered through the dense trees, and the wind whispered a very ominous sound through the branches. The house, full of broken windows and rotting trees, felt like a strange guardian watching over the terrible events. We were excited and a little nervous, but we all had a great time. By then, when I entered that terrible door, it was pitch black inside. We could smell the void around us, and the cold air made us shiver. Chris dropped the Ouija board onto a very dusty table in the center of the room, and Rick, Sarah, and I gathered around it. We blew out the candles, whispered a little, and began to summon all the ghosts of that terrible place. My fingers were shaking as they lay on the tablet. "Is there someone who wants to start?" Rick was shaking as he said, "I'll start." But after playing with the board for 5 minutes, suddenly someone spoke.
Who are you? What are you doing here?
I panicked and screamed loudly. Due to the low light, it was almost impossible to see anyone in the dark. He was completely uncomfortable and his eyes were full of anger. The man's voice continued, but now it sounded completely angry and shaky.
This is my house, children. Who do you think you are to come and play with something you don't understand?
We stood in the dark, hearts pounding as we rushed to put out the fire. Human breathing was gradually approaching us. I could barely make out his face, but his eyes were like a dangerous storm of anger. Rick, a true storyteller, said,
I didn't even know people lived here. I thought it was abandoned.
He stared at us forever, and we were horrified.
Come on, we were just kids.
Instead of taking a violent stance, he just smiled bitterly.
Do you really think that I'm a scary ghost or an evil creature? No, I'm a person with nothing.
He sighed deeply and sat down in the creaky old chair.
I have lived here for many years, since I was laid off and my family left me. I have this place. I'm not one to hold grudges, and I feel incredibly isolated and emotionally drained.
I felt relieved and sad for the person. We never expected this. Rick sympathized.
Is there anything we can do to help?
He asked. The man grunted, his eyes wide.
Can you get me something? Food, or could you please bring me something to eat, or a blanket? Man, it's pretty cold here at night.
I said, I got you. We promised to return all items and provide support whenever possible. When we got out of bed that night, we thought a lot about the real world instead of being scared by horror games. Our love of the outdoors brought us together in ways we never would have expected and turned our world upside down. So, I left that horrible old house with a new outlook on life. Adolescent trails aside, our wild night just got even better. We mixed our excitement by lending a helping hand to those we care about. In the beginning, we were probably all thrill seekers, but I've made some progress. He eventually became a friend.